I'm so excited to have our guest today. He is someone who's changing the way that we understand our health, one test at a time. And if you've ever wondered whether the foods that you eat could be behind your lingering symptoms, you're going to want to lean in for this one. Hey friend, welcome to Gut Fix. Are you ready to finally get rid of those debilitating digestive symptoms? Do you catch yourself staying up late Googling things like, what can I eat? Or how do I stop a flare? Or maybe you're just lying awake wondering, how did this ever happen to me? I'm Wendy, and I've been exactly where you are, desperately searching for answers, but determined to find natural solutions. And like you, I was overwhelmed by all the conflicting information out there and unsure of what might really work for me. And so now in this podcast, I'm here to share with you what I've learned, how to listen to your body's signals, and uncover the common mistakes that might be standing in the way of your healing. So grab your favorite drink, pop in your earbuds, and let's dive into your health transformation together. James White brings over 30 years of global experience in the diagnostics and pharmaceutical industries, having successfully launched a wide range of innovative products aimed at improving disease detection and management. His work spans multiplex molecule diagnostic instruments, advanced reagents, and point-of-care blood gas solutions. As the CEO and owner of KBMO Diagnostics, James is the driving force behind the acquisition and commercialization of the patented Food Inflammation Test, or FIT, the first assay to simultaneously measure IgG 1 through 4 antibodies and the complement protein C3d, a key marker of inflammation. The FIT test analyzes reactivity to 176 foods, colorings, and additives, offering a groundbreaking approach to personalizing diets to reduce inflammation. This has helped patients manage symptoms related to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, IBS, autoimmune conditions, and even support weight loss efforts. And under James' leadership, KBMO has expanded its products line to include the FIT 22, FIT 132, and FIT 176 panels, as well as the gut barrier panel, which tests for biomarkers such as candida, zonulin, occludin, and lipopolysaccharides. His strategic vision has driven the company's growth from a startup with just 5 providers to a global network of over 10,000 practitioners, with international distribution across Asia, Europe, and Latin America. KBMO's infrastructure includes a fully ISO and FDA-registered manufacturing facility, 2 CLIA-certified high-complexity laboratories, and robust sales, marketing, and logistics operations. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the company was among the first to respond, offering both antibody and PCR testing to healthcare providers nationwide. For joining us, we're so grateful to have you here with us. And tell us a little bit about how you got started, what got you started in developing this food sensitivity testing to begin with.
Perfect. Thank you for the question, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. And thank you for everyone's listening. Very much appreciated for spending some time with us. That's a great question. So how did we get to where we are in terms of how did we start looking at this? And without going into kind of ancient history, but I'll kind of try and kind of give you the kind of the cliff notes of it, as it were. So what I was in my kind of previous life before I founded KBMO, I'd done some genetic testing where we got the first test through the FDA. I'd done some blood gas analysis work. And latterly, I'd been doing some stuff in cardiovascular health. And it seemed to me slightly disingenuous that after 8 years of training, the most kind of personalized they could get was eat less and exercise more, fundamentally. So it's like, there's got to be a more, precise way of getting to the kind of heart of that discussion around nutrition. And so I was looking around at, I'd run public companies. We'd done very well on those, but I really wanted to get back into the trenches, working with providers and really focusing on the 2 main things, which I really love, which is, in creating innovative products, and then on top of that, listening to the kind of amazing brains out there in terms of the providers, say what is it that they need to help treat patients. And so with those two things in mind, plus slight dissatisfaction with what we were seeing in the cardiology market, I came across this test. And so it had been developed by a gentleman called Dr. Brent Dorval, whose not insignificant claim to fame was he'd invented the first rapid HIV diagnostic. And so he'd moved sideways and said, I'm looking at this food sensitivity area where, people were running lots of tests, but they weren't generally happy with the results. And he said the problem that we were seeing was that people were measuring exposure to foods. And we'll go on and debate the quality of food and all those other good things, but the reality is we all need to be exposed to food. So that wasn't really an optional thing he was measuring. It was a bit of a so what. And so that all these companies are measuring a pathway called IgG, which is really telling you which foods you're exposed to, but nothing beyond that. And so he said, look, with all my infectious disease background and knowledge of the body, I think we should be looking at what they call the innate immune system as well. So to give you an opportunity to look at the whole immune system, and really, rather than kind of throwing the baby out with the bath water and saying, all exposure testing is bad, take advantage of the exposure, i.e. the IgG, and then say, can we refine that by then overlaying with that, let's look at which of the foods that people are exposed to on an individualized basis are causing them inflammation, which, as I'm sure all of your listeners will be aware of, is the root cause of everything. And so the idea was, he said, look, let's just refine this. And rather than go into deep research, let's say there's a test here. It's not ideal because it's got lots of false positives. And any of the providers listening, or anyone who's is unfortunate to run an IgG only test, it comes back with just generally 20 plus foods. And it's really overwhelming for the patient. And they kind of talk about being in a kind of food prison and kind of nasty things like that. Where we're like, how do we change that whole conversation to make it a more positive thing? And more importantly, positive as well as really no judgment about it, but more to say, how on an individualized basis can we look at which foods are truly causing an inflammatory response? And so at that point, Dr. Brent, brilliant scientist, but maybe not as crazy as me in terms of wanting to kind of travel the world and kind of spread the good word of what he was doing. We partnered up and decided to say, look, I'll take over the sales and marketing of this so we can really kind of blow this out the water and make sure we can spread that word of nothing wrong with looking at exposure to foods, but more importantly, let's look at which of those are causing an inflammatory response. And so that was about 15 years ago. At that point, we had 3 doctors running it. I went and spoke to all 3 of them. They were evangelical in their praise for this test. And they're like, I've never seen anything like it. It really works well with a range of patients who are inflamed. And again, without being disingenuous to the entire population, but probably 99% of us are inflamed. So it seemed to be a great place to start to say, we're all 100% of us are eating. So 99% of us are inflamed. So why don't we look at that as a really good baseline to say, anyone who's coming in to see a provider, new patient or old, why don't we work out, given they're all 100% of them are doing this thing of eating, let's work out what they're eating is actually causing inflammation. And it's generally a handful of foods and will enable us to really get some amazing clinical outcomes. And so that was really the kind of genesis of how we started. It was this brilliant scientist and then someone a bit crazy wanted to go and travel the world on planes to say, how can we get more and more people doing this? And so we're now at a point that we've gone from our one little manufacturing site in Hopedale, Massachusetts, to now we have 2 clear high complexity labs there. We've got labs now running the test in Mexico City, Chile, Brazil, Beijing. In fact, we're probably one of the only crazy enough people who actually sells things to China. So again, with FedEx love us on the basis they're sending all these empty planes to China with little KBMO boxes in there, which are also kind of having tests run in China, which is a great thing. And then we have an amazing facility in the UK as well, and then the main office here in Boston. So it's been quite the journey over 15 years, and we continue to expand. And we've been very fortunate that we've got now over 10,000 clients around the world running the test. So hopefully that didn't blow all our time on not just talking about how we got here, but
no.
that was the kind of the shortened version.
And that was a very good broad overview of how it got started, but also too, I mean, I've been in, I haven't been practicing as long as I have been personally in the field. And I know back when I was going through my challenges, food sensitivity really wasn't a thing on any level. And now I see just, I mean, so many of my clients come with fatigue, they come with, brain fog, mood issues, and they don't realize that it could be coming from what they're eating every day. And
Yeah.
it's not something that maybe they just put in their body right away, but over time, as it builds up in there, it produces that sensitivity and triggered by all these foods that they're eating. They don't even realize it, even though they think they're eating healthy.
Yeah. Well, and I think, it comes back to some of those, unfortunate tenets that, we all eat around, and it's probably very aptly named, actually, the food pyramid. And I'd argue it's probably about as useful as a pyramid on the basis that the reality is we're all individuals. So, once you kind of, get over that huge hurdle, which seems to be out there in the world, that we are all individual, there's no such thing as one size fits all, then at that point, that's when I think the real magic happens for a lot of our providers and the people who run this test. And so we're very fortunate that we've got a lot of providers out there running it. And so again, for patients and listeners, the people who are running this test, I kind of slightly laughingly call them the 1%. And that's the 1% of providers out there who really care about nutrition and how that impacts your health. Because, as you rightly pointed out, Wendy, it's like that is really what's driving you. And the analogy I always use to providers who are thinking, so why would I run this? Is like, when you go and buy a new car, they will tell you which oil to put in that engine to make it run the most efficiently.
Yeah.
So if you think that oil coming in is the food that you're consuming and that engine is your body, then this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to kind of fine tune your engine by using the right oil or food to come into it, which isn't, unbeknown to you, causing you inflammation. And I think the really, really wonderful thing about this test is there's no judgment attached to it, because a lot of the patients, by the time they get to good functional medicine or holistic providers or naturopaths, unfortunately, they've probably had a pretty miserable experience of being bounced around 7 or 8 providers who generally will have done a great job of scolding the hell out of them and told them how bad your lifestyle is, how bad this is, how bad that is, which is pretty boring to kind of spend a lot of money and then on top of that tell them how kind of crappy you are. So the idea here is there's no judgment attached. It's basically telling you on an individualized basis which foods are causing you an inflammatory response. This isn't a scare story. It's like, how do we go, great, eggs, it's for me, or dairy or wheat or whatever it is. If I eliminate that, hopefully if that brings my level of inflammation down, then the symptoms I'm presenting with when I come to see Wendy or whichever the other providers that you guys are using go and see, then it gives you this huge opportunity to see some quick wins. And I always tell providers, this is like a level 1. So let's not start as a black belt from day one. Let's start as, level 1. Let's get some success, and then that earn the trust of the patients who, as I say, unfortunately have been really badly treated in terms of because they've been bounced around the system. And again, that's no knock on any of the people they've seen prior to that, but again, we're trying to get to the root cause, which I think is the key to all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too that just speaks to the fact that there are practitioners out there, good, bad, right, or wrong, that really gravitate towards one specific diet,
Yeah.
whether it's paleo or keto or carnivore or whatever it is. And that may be all well and good, but unless you're using it in conjunction with what could be causing the inflammation and the foods that could be causing you, challenges, it's not going to work for everybody. And so there's never a one size fits all in my opinion, for anything, including sleep. Well, not sleep. Sleep, yeah, that is a one size fits all.
Yeah,
Everybody
yeah.
needs it.
But to your
Um,
point, it's there's very few things in life you can say, well, that's the one thing which is always going to help. Because again, even if you think, if you think of the 3 tenets of exercise, sleep,
yeah.
and your diet, exercise, it could be that if you're doing cardiovascular exercise the whole time, no weights, that may not be good for you. Or if you do all weights, no cardio. So again, it's generally worth working with professionals in all 3 of those groups to say, look, what is the way of tailoring things to my individual body or age, or whatever outcome you're looking from your own health journey. So I think we're all wanting to live longer but healthier. And so again, we don't feel like it's success if I was in a wheelchair from the age of 60 to 90, but if I can have an active life and be participating as I want to, whatever that definition would be, I think that's the key. And so I think that's what most of us, I think, are looking for. But as I say, the great thing is 100% of your listeners will be eating, so that's not optional. Right. So that's the great thing about this test. It gives you a really good way of taking some control of your health and your diet, and really learning something that you wouldn't have been aware of. And as I say, that's not a negative in any shape or form. There's no way you could have known these things. So that's the great thing is, some of us get, that gut feeling about it, but generally, because with the sensitivity versus an allergy, that sensitivity can be delayed up to 72 hours. And so that's frankly why it makes it so much more complicated to work out, what any of us have eaten in the last 72 hours. As my wife was, I'm not sure where you've been in 72 hours, and just in terms of the flights and things I've been taking, but the reality is in terms of where, what we're consuming is really critical. And so that's the great thing with this test. It gives you a really easy to read and understand report. And I think for most of us, it's actionable. And again, I'm certainly not knocking like genetic testing, but if you get 50 pages come back at you, you're probably like going, ooh. Yeah. And I think the reality is most of the patients, whether it's an age thing or not, our attention spans are only getting smaller and shorter. So if you can have something that's easy to understand and relatable, frankly, I mean, if you think about it, when you see our report, you understand what all these foods are. So when you understand that, then you can, hopefully, and well, not hopefully, what we've seen in practice over the last 15 years is patients feel like they can take control of their own journey. And I think that's a really important thing in this day and age. And probably if the whole COVID disaster taught us nothing else, it's like, we have to take control of our own health. We can't be dependent on the government or any third party to do that. As ever in life, it's it's what you do yourself, which is going to be, I think, really the dramatic difference maker.
Yeah, 100%. I agree 100%, taking control of yourself. And I think that what I love about this test, for even just for somebody who's afraid to do the big deep dive into, like, say, my whole coaching, which is 5 foundational labs. So that can be very overwhelming. All the information on your hormones, on your gut, on everything. But this is something that somebody can do at home. It's simple, right? It's just blood spots where you prick.
Yeah, it's a finger stick. So, as I say, there's a neat video that goes with it. So it makes it really easy to understand. Again, I'm sure the women out there are better at reading instructions than all the men, but so there's a video that, even the men can hopefully kind of work out. So the idea there is, watch that video, follow the steps. And, we've had a very high proportion of people work it out. There's a little lancet that it comes, a little pricker that you use on your finger. Again, with experience, there's a couple in there for patients. So the first one we always know ends in the kitchen table.
Yeah.
So if you put your first one on the kitchen table, you're not the first or last person to do it. Hopefully the second one ends in your finger. And so that's the idea of having it so that, again, you dry the spots. It takes probably half an hour. And the nice thing, it comes with a stamped addressed envelope. So, wander out to the mailbox, put it in there, and it comes back to us. And then, Wendy or whoever your provider is, within 7 to 10 business days from it hitting our lab, which is in Boston, you'll get the results back. And so, and then there's an app that follows that. So it's really easy to follow through. The other nice thing is we provide a meal plan. So again, some of the providers are really good nutritionists, and they can do that as well. Most providers, they certainly aren't. I've not heard any of them say, "Oh gosh, I wish I could do my own meal plans, James." It's really disappointing. So the idea there is, it helps them, but more importantly, gives you some direction of what you can do, and all that information is on your phone. And again, probably like 100% of us are eating. Probably 95% of us have got phones pretty much glued to us the whole time as well. So the idea is put it somewhere where you can use it, where you can access it. And again, the whole idea about the app is we're trying to give you more ways of being compliant, because if you can be compliant, then good things happen, more importantly to you, but also it helps the providers as well. And that's really our role, as I always said, within the company is to remove friction for the patient and the provider. How do we make this as simple and straightforward as we can? And so that's really one of the things that we do within the business, and hopefully we're getting some success by doing that.
Yeah, and I think too that the fact that it is so simple, but also there's quick wins, right? Because
Yeah.
because you have that meal plan, and everybody, it's not like you're saying, like you said earlier, like you're not seeing 50 different foods on there that you have to avoid. It's the ones that are really causing the big problems. And once you can, kind of dial that in a little bit, you get some quick wins. You start to feel a little better. And the fact that you've added that gut barrier panel to them is huge as well. That eliminates, in some cases, one of my foundational labs, so they can be two in one.
Yeah, and I think the concept behind the food sensitivity test, I mean, the gut barrier was to say, look, you know, we're out there a lot, talked to a lot of the providers, and when I set up the business back, 15 years or so ago, I was out on the streets, doing all the kind of sales, and I was up in New Hampshire a lot, talking to some of the great providers up there, and the feedback was, look, I love the fact that this is the only patented test on the market. We love the fact you've kind of eliminated these false positives so you can really zero in on a handful of tests. Love the meal plan, love the app. But some patients I don't test because I think they have leaky gut. And so that kind of stuck in my mind that, they were kind of testing, not guessing. But frankly, in their defense, at that point, there wasn't really a good panel they could run to look at both sides of that kind of what I kind of almost euphemistically call it, the chicken or egg, which comes first? Is it leaky gut or food sensitivity? And it doesn't really matter, but we want to give you that evidence so that when they're reviewing your results for the patient, then they're armed with the right kind of stuff to kind of take things forward. And so that's the important thing there with that gut barrier. And it gives you a way of looking at a patient's immune health. And so I said I wasn't going to go back into ancient history, but Hippocrates back in 400 BC said all disease begins in the gut. And so, again, in some level, without getting everyone too depressed in terms of saying, well, oh my gosh, we haven't really made much progress since then. The good news now is we've got some tools which enable us to test that and easily say, okay, what might be going on from a leaky gut standpoint? And so we measure 4 markers which look at, is there any early dysbiosis? So kind of like a kind of canary in the coal mine, as it were. Is there something early stage going on? And then we look at a thing called the tight junctions, and they look at basically it's a cell thick, and what it works out, are they opening and closing as they should, and structurally are they staying together? And then we also look at a marker which looks deep into the gut to say what's going on from what they call the gram-negative bacteria, as well as is it a strong stimulator of, again, this innate immune system, which is what we're measuring with the complement activation markers as well. So gives you a very comprehensive way. But the good news for everyone listening is it's all done through this finger stick. So again, there's some great stool tests out there, but as I say stool, I can see people turning off the radio or kind of turning off the podcast. So that's generally the problem. No one really wants or loves doing stool testing. So the idea is this for the patients and providers is a really easy way of getting a lot of information about the foods, the inflammation, and now the immune system to work out, do I really need to do that kind of gut, the gut testing, which is the stool testing as well. So this gives you a really quick and easy way of working some of that out. And then the other thing we've done is we've also partnered with kind of probably 8 of the best supplement companies in the world. And so the idea was to say, armed with this, leaky gut panel, what would they kind of recommend providers, prescribe patients? And so that's been a really helpful tool for the providers to say, like, frankly, patients, a lot of them are learning some of this stuff on the fly and on the new, slightly new to them. So the idea is to simplify it and then give them some kind of treatment protocols that they can work alongside with the patients. And really the cadence of this testing, as it were, is to say, you run the food sensitivity tests and we measure up to 176 different foods, calories, and additives. And that also includes the gut barrier panel. And then generally, if anything's elevated on that gut barrier panel, then look at, and there's 8 markers on there, you then look at one of these gut healing protocols, and then that gives you some supplements to then take for the next 3 to 6 months. And then we recommend just retesting the gut barrier, as I say, 6 months later. And then the idea with that is, again, within functional medicine and kind of holistic medicine, I'd argue it's a really transformational way of looking at things versus just traditional methods. But we maybe not be as good at sometimes saying, let's check to make sure we've actually healed things. So by doing that gut barrier, it enables you to go, high five, we've cleared up all that stuff. The supplements worked. The elimination of those foods has helped reduce the inflammation. And again, if you think about your gut, it's the size of a tennis court. So what you don't want to be doing is keep bombarding it with the things which are causing it inflammation. So if you can remove those foods, heal the gut at the same time, then, as I say, you'll start feeling better with whatever those symptoms that might have been happening before, were causing you. So again, the idea is that dual effect of looking at the inflammation caused by the diet and then looking at the immune system by looking at the gut are two really, frankly, to Wendy's point, quick win options to try and really move your health forward. And the nice thing with the foods is, again, you're generally only eliminating things for 3 months. So I always say that, in easy parlance, it's a semester. And again, a semester, I always say, flies by very quickly if you're doing it. It takes a bit longer if you're paying for it. But generally, it's, a semester is the kind of time to think of in terms of the elimination of the foods, and then a bit longer just to heal the gut in terms of that 6-month period, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that, after say 3 months, 3 to 6 months, you retest just the gut barrier if you've had a compromised, gut barrier. And I know that a lot of people, I get this question a lot, is that if I have a food sensitivity, does that mean I'm sensitive to it for the rest of my life? So do they have to redo this test, say, in a year or so?
They certainly can, and that's helpful. But generally, what we hear from both patients and providers, and this is probably an unusual thing from a lab owner to tell you, but my view is, look, if they're feeling better by eliminating those foods, again, high five moment, let's keep moving, versus worrying about let's go back and retest. They know what the foods were, they feel better from eliminating them. And then, frankly, it's that reintroduction period of if they still feel bad or the symptoms return, if they introduce some of those foods, take them out for a longer time period. And frankly, that information is so powerful for them because they can go, okay, look, if I happen to eat eggs and it means that it brings on diarrhea or migraines or whatever it might be, you've got a choice in life, haven't you, as ever? Do I put up with that symptom or this is the cause and effect? So it's a brilliant piece of information I've got there. How do I now want to take that forward in my life? Don't want to go, oh yeah, going to the bathroom 6 times every 3 hours is acceptable, or that's probably not how I want to live my life. So again, whatever it might be. And so generally, I think that information and the symptoms are why they've come to see you as a provider, then they generally want to go, look, let me address that. But more importantly, you're giving them that that powerful information that enables them to kind of make some choices, hopefully in a positive manner, for their overall life and their bodies.
Yeah. No, and I think for sure. They're simple. It's not easy sometimes to give up some of your favorite foods if they happen to be causing you issues, but it's simple. It's not like you're changing your entire life just to feel better.
And it's, I was talking with a provider, a gentleman called Dr. Gene Gresh, who runs an amazing compounding pharmacy just outside Hartford, Connecticut. And we were talking about this story with this lady who had come to see him. She was suffering from some really debilitating pain in her hip. And he said, like, it's an inflammatory response. I'm going to suggest that you run the food sensitivity test. Well, so to start with, she was totally, he said apoplectic, which again is probably my general nice way of saying what she was saying to him. But she was not happy. It's probably a better description of why he was making her run this test. It's like, why are you making me look at my diet when it's my hip that's causing me the pain? And so it's interesting. The results came back. There was some dairy issues and eggs. And so, so she, as you can tell, reluctantly removed both those elements. But the nice thing is that the key thing is it's only 2 areas. So again, to your point, Wendy, it's like most of us can get on board if it's 5 to 10 things. If it's 20 plus, I get it. No one's going to do that, and I'm with you. So no problem. As a patient, I'd go, I don't care how better I'm going to feel. There's nothing I can eat here, so that's not really going to work. So, but it's generally, the good news is it's 5 to 10 foods. So in this lady's case, it was dairy and eggs. So she took them both out, and so he checked back in kind of a month later. She said, well, I haven't had the hip pain for 4 weeks, she said, but it's not the food. And he went, yeah, no, of course it's not the food. Fully agree with you. Can't be the food because, had nothing to do with that. 8 weeks later, they looked and then said, well, let's look to reintroduce these things. The dairy introduced, no changes. She reintroduced the eggs next. The pain came back kind of almost on steroids.
Wow.
So she was like, and so I think, eggs and hip pain aren't always linked. So again, we're not saying that if you've got hip pain, remove eggs from your diet. But what I am saying is that underlying level of inflammation in your body that sometimes, it's continually burning. And it just takes maybe one or two things like that to tip it over to the edge to cause that increase in pain again. So, and again, I think, she reluctantly at the end of 3 months had decided that maybe eggs had something to do with it, but again was a reluctant passenger on that whole process. But again, it just shows you that it's often not many things, but it's amazing how smart and clever your body is, that if you eliminate these things, then it just bringing the inflammation down enough. But then again, if you reintroduce it, it can come back sometimes with a vengeance. So again, it just have to be careful how you do that. But yeah, as I say,
that's an interesting story.
Compounding pharmacist, and again, he sees lots of patients just outside Hartford, Connecticut, but a really brilliant provider.
That's interesting. That she still wasn't really ready to make that correlation, even though.
Okay. The good news is he was getting great outcomes. So again, and sometimes not all not all of us can travel with in a positive mind. But the good news is that if you do take these things out, generally there'll be good things happen. And again, it's back to that thing here is it's inflammation. It's so are we inflamed? Is that weight loss? Is that migraines? Is it autoimmune type disease? Is it just feeling down and just lacking energy? There's all sorts of ways that inflammation can impact you. And is it joint pain, which again is
skin issues?
Yeah, exactly. And all of those things are if you're healthy, there's nothing greater than you're out for a walk, you just feel wonderful. As soon as that gets taken away from you, you get grumpy, you get really miserable very quickly. And so, we like to do that. And, those endorphins and stuff getting them pumping around our body. So I think that's where this is really powerful information, again, in terms of helping you identify, what might be, triggering some of that inflammation within your body.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that you have 3 different levels of your of the food sensitivity. The 22, what's the one in the middle is
the 132 and then the 176. And those numbers are associated with the number of foods, colorings, and additives that we measure. And it's worth thinking about those colorings and additives. I know that any of you in the kind of reading the papers recently or online, you'll see the importance of what's been going on. There's a lot more chat about the colorings and additives than maybe has happened historically. But increasingly, you'll find them in processed foods, sometimes in supplementation. But thirdly, the one to think about as well is personal hygiene products. So, they're in shampoos, they're in face creams, they're in washing powders. And so I had a good example from a provider the other day, kind of picks on a couple of points here. She liked to use the elimination diet for her patients, which is slightly long, torturous, and arduous for the patient and her, frankly. But hey, again, if that's what she was trained in, I'm not here to kind of throw salt in the wound on that one. But the idea is that's one bit of a one size fits all. Can take a long time because you're trying a food, eliminating it, trying another one. So again, I'd argue that maybe in the 19th century that was applicable. I don't think that's applicable today, just because no one's got the attention span or the time to do those things. So she said, look, I've got this patient. He's a 10-year-old boy. He's really lethargic. And any of you who remember having a 10-year-old boy or got a grandson who's 10-year-old boy, you know that lethargic is not the standing operating procedure. So the idea was we tested him because, again, he said something's really wrong. We can't work out what's going on. He came up for a thing called benzoic acid, which turned out was in the shampoo that his mum was using on him and his washing powder that she was using. So removed both of those sources, and within a month, he was back to his normal self. But it's again, the reason I highlight that is because if you did an elimination diet, I can guarantee you, however, however accurate and thorough you might be, you're probably not going to say, well, let's check out the benzoic acid. So that's one of the important elements why we've included these colorings and additives, because again, they can impact you. And so if you think about skin related issues, when you see rashes and stuff, that's your natural inflammatory response from your body. And so that's some of the things that, again, it's worth pointing out with, a long way to talk about the 22, 132, and 176. But again, those colorings and additives are really, I think, critical to look at. And, I think the FDA in their light speed and unbelievable thoughtfulness are, I think, in 4 years time we're going to remove these colorings and additives, but wow, I'm glad they didn't move that fast or anything else.
Yeah.
So anyway, the idea is they will finally get round to kind of eliminating those. So as I say, interesting that I think it was 1970 or 1960 they eliminated them from using them in skin creams, but I think they're waiting, exactly another 60 years to remove them from you ingesting them. So I'm
Right.
sure there was many very learned PhDs and intelligent individuals who came out with that decision. But the reality is, good news is they will come out, and we may be up with the Europeans and the rest of the world who obviously removed
Someday.
those many, many, many years ago.
It's interesting. I had just done an episode not too long ago, about, the toxins that are in your skincare and in your products, your personal
Yep.
products. And that, I mean, people don't think about that, but your skin
No.
is your largest organ and it is getting into your system.
Yep.
I mean, it will get into I mean, it can affect your gut from what
Yep.
you're putting on your skin. So,
Yep.
yeah, that's interesting. I think the 176 is the way to go, no question.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. It gives you a much more, comprehensive look at it. And when we moved from the 132 to the 176, some of the things we added there were really some of the key ingredients in a lot of the supplements that providers are giving. So think goji berry, monk fruit, stevia, things like that, which are in a lot of the really helpful powders that are out there.
Yeah.
We also added CBD because, again, that's being used more and more frequently. We also added the three main ingredients of omega-3 because, again, omega-3s and fish oils are a natural anti-inflammatory, but we want to make sure before your provider gives you that you don't respond to that. And we've often seen when we test the providers, and a lot of the providers will do this test themselves before they unleash it on their patients, which I always think is a good idea. And they'll say, well, it's interesting, James, I came back from sardines, I never eat the sardine. And I'll say to them, well, that's not saying you do, but do you do any fish oils? They're like, how did you guess? And so, well, you'll find the sardines are in those fish oils. So
Yeah.
again, it's interesting. Some of the additional things we've added there, black beans, some of the things which I think, kale. So again, a number of those things which I think are a lot more relevant today than maybe 15, 20 years ago when we initially came out with the Fit 132.
Yeah, that is so interesting that you mentioned that sardines and the fish oil because again, it's not even the supplements, they're not a one size fits all for everybody. And
Absolutely not. I mean, it's one of those things. Not all supplements are made equally, and
yeah.
so again, it's really really tricky for I think for patients to walk into any of those stores. I mean, it's frankly overwhelming. I mean, I don't
Oh
I
yeah.
take my hat off to anyone who can really decipher their way through. There probably should be a PhD in walking into one of those health food stores, to be honest, because they're pretty overwhelming with the number of lotions, potions, and bottles they've got on shelves. So I think it's really tough for patients to work that out. But
Oh,
that's
for
why I
sure.
think working with a good provider is so critical because they will have the experience of going through all the good supplement companies. And as I say, there's a good list of 8, and I'll make sure Wendy's got that list of supplement protocols afterwards. But and the names of the companies. But those guys, I would say, are the industry leaders in terms of the best of the best. So, and all the providers that we work with have been really thankful that those guys have come up with these protocols, which makes life significantly easier for the patient as well, because you want to know, okay, if I'm my markers on my gut barrier are elevated, I wanted to heal that. I want to do something about it. So that gives you certainly a really good first step into kind of treating those as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. When I was going through my certification for FDN, um, doing our mock-up, client protocols, that was one of the things that got me a couple of times was recommending a supplement, and the clinical advisor would come back and say, "Are you sure that's the one? Are you
Yeah.
sure that's the one you want to use?" And then I'd go back to the food sensitivity and go, "Nope, that's not the one I want to use."
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a great learning for me.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so passionate about this test.
Which again, Wendy, if you think about it, it's joined up, isn't it? It's like it's
Yeah.
you're thinking about that, and sometimes you see some patients get put on a ton of medication, and no one's doing what you're doing, which is
Right.
how do these things interact? How do all these things link in together? And so again, that's if there's any message for the providers, the patients out there, work with the providers who are thinking in those in joined up terms in terms of your systems, but more importantly, your medications and the treatments and the diagnostics they're recommending you to look at.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Even just with the supplements that we do recommend, I mean, I'm a big one for titrating them. Start with one at a time and start
Yeah,
at a very low dose, because
yeah,
even with a food sensitivity test and doing all of that, you still could react to something
yeah,
based on other systems in your body. So,
yeah,
you throw 5 supplements in and you have a reaction, you have no idea which one it was. So,
yeah, yeah.
um,
That's great advice for sure.
yeah. Well, James, I really, really appreciate your time today. I know you're busy, and like I said, this is a test for me that I'm very passionate about. I think it's probably one of the most important tests that my clients and, well, frankly, anybody, if they want to find out what's going on in their body, because it all starts in the gut, and inflammation is at the root of pretty much all chronic disease.
Exactly.
So,
Now, there's one thing I have to leave you with, and I
yeah.
feel bad that I didn't start off the whole conversation with it. I needed to tell you what KBMO stands for.
Ah,
So
yes.
K stands for K, my wife, B, Ben, my eldest son, M, Max, my middle son, O, Olivia. We saved the best to last, Olivia White, my daughter. So again,
Oh,
we're a family-run company, and
love it.
everything we do is really, really critical to me. And so we all have our bosses, and so there's my four that get me up in the morning in terms of to make sure that we're doing the best of the best in terms of the products, the support we do, and anything we add in terms of making sure again it keeps that high bar of what's important for us. And again, unusually probably for some CEOs, my cell phone's on my card, and we encourage all our providers to kind of call in and let me know. And as I say, for me, the great thrill of my job is the development of best in class science, as well as partnering with great providers like Wendy to give pass on the message, and equally hear feedback from her about what's important and how we can continually upgrade and improve the products on offer to her to help treat you guys as well as she can.
Beautiful. Thank you again, James. And yeah, we'll have you back on
Look forward to it. All
real
right, great.
soon.
Thanks everyone. Much appreciated. Thanks for your time.
Hey, friend, I hope today's episode brought you some real value. If it did, would you take just 30 seconds to share it with a friend who might be struggling to get her gut in check? And if you're feeling extra generous, leave me a review on Apple. It absolutely lights me up knowing that this podcast is making a difference for you. All right, it's time for me to grab my protein shake and get my gut happy. I'll see you back here next Tuesday for another episode of Gut Fix. And until then, stay happy and stay healthy.